Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for joining me for something to drink on. Kind of like I said, trying a new format today. Finally have a little bit of intro music provided by my good friend Al Capone, who, as some of you might know, has already been on an episode of this podcast. So if you want to go check that out, I'd greatly appreciate it. Razzleberry Tea, that's the one that he and I did together. But today, I kind of want to introduce this person a little bit better than I did in the actual recording. It's my friend Teeny. She's awesome. We talk about some really deep stuff, actually getting some serious uh, things that she's been dealing with, that she's been working through. So, just kind of as a warning, hey, we got some heavy stuff talking about, like a little bit of trauma that she dealt with her divorce and just various things like that. But hey, hopefully it's something you can listen to and you can appreciate the journey that she's been on, because I know personally I loved listening to it and hearing about it, and even suggested multiple times that she write a book, because it was just such a fascinating story to me and such a good idea to reflect on, is how strong she's been getting through everything. And I'm very proud to call her my friend, very proud of her as a person, for being able to push through. And, one of the things that we talk about is her connection to God and how that kind of helped her get through it. So, again, like I said, and like I always say, I hope you guys enjoy this at least half as much as I did. And, hopefully you keep listening afterwards. But let me know what you think about the new format, especially with the intro music. And yeah, we'll see how else I can keep improving this and making it better for everybody. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have Teeny, my friend here. That is her nickname, but that is what I have always called her since I met her. Again, another college friend from good old AU, the good old debt center, where we all come from. And we're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff, and about how adulting is horrible and good, and what's getting us through life right now, or what we're getting through in life, maybe is a better phrase. Because you've had a lot of changes over, I mean, not even including COVID and everything else, and everything else, and everything else that has been this year. But, you've had a lot yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a lot past year.
So where do you want to start with that?
Where to start? Okay, well, I mean, I can start a year ago.
Okay.
So, 1 year ago, almost exactly, I think like last week was a year, um, I found out that my now ex husband, but husband at the time, was having an affair. And it turns out it was several people, not just one. I I left after I found out. Me and my toddler left, and then a week later, I found out I was expecting. So that was rough.
That was a year ago.
That was a year ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That
So
yeah.
so I met with an attorney pretty quickly, like after I left, just to get some information. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to work things out, but I wasn't sure. And I just wanted to know what my rights were, and that kind of stuff. Um, and I was informed you can't get a divorce while you're pregnant in my county. So,
Holy crap, are you serious?
yeah. So,
That's that's something I've never heard of before.
yeah. So I'm not really sure exactly why. I don't know if it's just like our judge, they he just doesn't typically do that. But yeah, so that was kind of tough, but I was like, okay, well, maybe that's a sign, like, I just need to work on things. And so we started like marriage counseling,
Mhm.
um, going a few times a week. And like after our very first counseling session, it went super well, I thought. But then literally the next day, I get a message from one of the women that he had been messing with, and she was like, yeah, he left a note on my car saying he missed me and that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, this is obviously not working. Um, but, really wanted it to work. So we kept going to the counselor. Um, but I think deep down, I always knew like things weren't changing, but I didn't have any options. I
Right.
couldn't, I couldn't get divorced, and we were still married. And so for me, I was like, I will be loyal and faithful because my vows meant something. Um, but it was really hard, just trying to like figure out between you're separated, but you're not divorced. And in my mind, we were still together, but actions weren't
Sure.
seeming that way.
Right.
So,
That's a lot. That's a lot for me to try to take in because honestly, this is going to sound terrible, but I'm still stuck on the you can't get divorced while you're married thing. Like
mm,
my brain just I mean, maybe it's like an old-fashioned kind of law
yeah.
thing, but that's such a weird thing because like and especially with this situation, like you'd think with
Hmm.
infidelity, like that would be a kind of a
Right.
clause or something there that's
I know.
you know
Yeah.
maybe there's that kind of a situation. Uh,
Yeah. And I don't know if it's I don't know. It was very frustrating. I'm not sure if it's again just because you're very up and down while you're pregnant. Like, I mean, you are. Let's be honest with that. There's lots of hormones and emotions
hormones
going on.
stable. What are you talking about? They're the easiest to deal with.
But, so I don't know if it's because of that, but working at DCS, I see a lot of children that are born that don't have like a father on their birth certificate. And I think that is also a way for courts to always have a father on a birth certificate because, by marriage, they are the legal father.
Right.
I mean, granted, in my case, obviously, my husband was the father of my child, but in some cases, that's not the
Right.
way it is. Um, so maybe that's just a way for the court to automatically at least have, this child has a father. Um, but again, I don't know how fair that is to a woman or a man.
Yeah, because there's also, again, you working in DCS, there's also situations where you don't want the father's name to be on the birth certificate or
Mhm.
to have anything to do with that situation. Uh,
Right.
which I've known a couple people who've been in those kind of situations. So it's like, you know, it's messy. It's really messy, and you know, it's a kind of to draw a comparison, not completely correlating the two. But I was working at a domestic violence shelter for a little while, and
Hmm.
so kind of seeing the contrast of like, a lot of women there who felt like stuck in a certain situation, and your situation where legally, and even like personally due to your own virtue, like you were kind of stuck
Hmm.
in a place you definitely didn't want to be, mostly emotionally for you, thankfully,
Absolutely.
just emotionally for you, not as well
Yes.
physically, um,
Yes.
but it's still like dealing with that while being pregnant and then preparing for kind of everything that was coming with the pregnancy, which we can talk about that more, which yeah, yeah, wow, we haven't talked this in depth about this yet, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like just sitting here trying to take it in as well. Like, geez, you've definitely overcome a lot, um, because like a marriage. a marriage in itself is hard to mourn, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
And which is weird to say, but like people who've been hurt, people who've been divorced, like I've heard that before, that idea that
Mhm.
it's you're literally mourning the death of that person of you two coming together, right?
Yeah,
Or at least even just the idea of it in some sense.
absolutely.
Um, but you guys, how long had you been married at that point?
We were married 3 years, just over 3 years.
I was gonna say
When I found out, yeah,
soon after we graduated.
yeah, yes. So we got married in 2016, June of 2016,
Yep.
and then was pretty much like expecting right after that.
Yeah.
So,
And then you're expecting right after you find out something else. Jeez.
yeah.
So yeah, that's tough. Um, so you try to figure out your legal situation. You kind of sat. You were trying to do therapy and
Mm,
counseling. Um, and when did that kind of stop? When did that kind of
like therapy stop.
yeah?
I think probably in December,
Okay.
around December, because like I said, um, so we had talked about like different things that um, maybe contributed to feeling separated or whatever, and that is why he, you know, did the actions that he did or whatever. Um,
Gotcha.
but it never stopped. So, and it wasn't just one person that he was with or talking with, it was several. And in December, whenever I knew it was over and done, and I just stopped everything, was because there's another girl who's pregnant and he could potentially be the father. But it's not, it's unknown, it's still unknown.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, I can't, like, it's not fair to me. It's not fair to my children. And I was so emotionally upset about everything and just like the turmoil of everything, going through grief. Um, I couldn't handle it. So I just had to separate myself um, from him and the situation entirely.
Yeah.
So um, that's kind of whenever everything ended, I
Yeah.
would say.
So about December.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was right before Christmas.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So this is kind of more of a prying question. Not that we've been, super surface level this whole time, uh,
Right.
but how was kind of the family reaction? Like, how was your family reaction? How was his? Because I know that can be
Mhm.
weird with these situations.
Yeah. So I moved back in with my parents. I'm still living with my parents.
Right.
Um, and
Good.
they were very guarded. They were very upset, very protective, as they should be. In the beginning, they um, I mean, they've always been supportive, but they were supportive of, you have to figure out what you want to do. We can't tell you what is best for you and your marriage and your life, but we want to make sure you make informed decisions and we don't want to see you hurt.
Right.
So they were I was like kind of not telling them everything I was finding out, like with other people, until one day I just burst and lost it, and they were like, we're really worried about you, we don't know what's going on, but we feel like you are going to be moving back in with him, and we don't think that's a good decision. And I was like, that's not even what it is, I'm staying here forever. And kind of like spilled my guts. So they've always been supportive, thank goodness. I have like the best family in the entire world. Like, they added on to their house. So I have my own room. Kai has her own room. Tala has her own room. We
That's all.
have a living, kind of like a little apartment.
Yeah.
Um, so that's super nice. But my ex husband's family, they were all very shocked as well. Um, I think just mostly disappointed. Um, his dad wasn't in his life, and he knows what it's like to grow up with a single mom. Um, and he only has sisters, so he's seen them go through similar situations. And so they just couldn't believe that this had happened. So,
Yeah.
but it's tough, obviously, because they love him and want to support him. He's obviously their family, so it makes it hard. But they've still been supportive of me and the girls too.
Okay. And that's really what I was kind of wondering. Like, what's his role right now with your daughters, and like what's their like the other? I know this is again weird question, but like with divorce it gets messy, and with kids it's messier, because you
Yeah.
have this person or people that need still that other support system. So like, are they still involved? Are they still like kind of like, are they playing ball? Are they playing dirty sometimes? Is it one of those situations or?
Um, like his family,
Hmm.
they actually live in Florida, so we don't see them very much.
Ah,
Um,
gotcha.
so
Oh, that's right. I forgot. He.
yeah, they I think the last time me and Kai saw them it was like January of 2019.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen them in quite a long time. And they actually haven't met Tala yet in person over like FaceTime and that kind of stuff. But with COVID and everything, just been kind of a messy, messy year.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I so much, so much.
so speaking of Tala, um, tell me about her. Tell me about like the pregnancy, kind of your thoughts, your fears, how you've overcome those since she's been born, and kind of everything that's been going on over the past couple months.
Okay. So we'll start from the very beginning. It is a story, so I apologize.
The beginning, from the top.
When I found out I was pregnant, I was super, super sick. Like, I thought I was just emotionally upset. I was like, I can't be pregnant. It's fine. But then I was like, oh, I feel like I might be. And so I took a test and I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening? What is my life? Like this is not a good situation. And then like a few weeks after I found out I was expecting, I was so sick. Like I couldn't get out of bed sick, throwing up every day.
Mhm.
I had hyperemesis.
Yep.
And so I couldn't keep anything down. I lost like 20 pounds just because emotionally I didn't want to eat. I couldn't eat. Physically, I couldn't eat. I couldn't keep anything down. I literally survived off Pedialyte and popsicles, and
Yep.
it was awful. um, I had like home health come in. They had to come in, set up like an IV in my house. Um, I was on bed rest.
At this
And
point, you were separated, right?
yeah, so I was separated, living with my parents. Me and Kai were in one bedroom. And so,
Home health
like,
care was coming in and giving you
yes,
IV, and oh my gosh.
yeah. And I had like a Zofran pump. So I had like medicine coming in like 24/7.
Right.
And Zofran is actually super, super hard on the body and like on the skin. So, like, it was like, so I had a Zofran pump, but I also had my diabetes pump.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, and so I'm like
And you're
hooked up all
diabetic
around.
to add to it, and we're
I
diabetic.
know.
Let's make it
So
better.
yes, and I couldn't eat because I was throwing up everything, and I was so sick. And so, um, actually on my birthday last year, like I said, I'm hooked up to an IV. I have my Zofran pump. I have my diabetes pump, and my sugar bottomed out, and my mom couldn't like wake me up. She had to call the ambulance and everything. My sugar was like 25. Um,
Jesus.
yeah, I don't remember anything, but I was severely out of it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was hospitalized like 3 times just to like get electrolytes in and that kind of stuff. Um, but thank goodness that ended after like 12 weeks. So I was like finally feeling better. Um, and then I felt good for like 3 weeks, and then I had like anatomy scan
Mhm.
at like 18 to 20 weeks, and at that point, that's when they found the extra fluid on Tala's brain.
Mhm.
So I just like went in for a routine scan, and they were like, we kind of see some extra fluid on her brain. Um, we don't really know what that means, but we're going to send you to a specialist in Evansville. Um, and so immediately, obviously, I'm freaking out. Um, the doctors kind of said, like, sometimes this happens with people who are diabetic. And so I'm like cursing myself, like, oh my gosh, I did this to her, like this is my fault. And then I'm also feeling guilty because I'm so stressed, and you know we're separated and there's all this going on, and I'm like, maybe it's me that's like making her do this. um so just trying to like figure all that out. So we went down to Evansville, and Torrance is going with me to all of these appointments.
Right.
So it's like super awkward silence, but I don't want him to miss out on, you know,
The stuff.
seeing his daughter grow and that kind of thing. But we're still whatever we are at that time. Um, and so we go down, we have another scan. We also have, they can do an MRI scan on a baby, on a baby's brain while you're pregnant. So that's cool. So we had a few of those. Um, and initially, we get a call back, and they said that she had Dandy Walker malformation, which basically just means like her brain is kind of structured differently. Her brain stem is small, her cerebellum is small, and she had hydrocephalus. So she had a lot of fluid on her brain. Her ventricles were extremely large. I can't remember what, I think the ventricle size is supposed to be like under 10, and hers were like 42. So they were extremely large.
Yeah.
Um, and so they were worried about how she was going to develop, if she was going to continue to develop, um, how big her head was going to be. And they spoke a lot about like terminating the pregnancy. So it's like going through separation. Emotionally, I'm a mess. Pregnant, you're already hormonal. And then this on top of it. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what's going on.
Like for you, somebody talking about terminating your pregnancy, how did that make you feel? Because like I know that's a big no-go for you.
Yeah, I was like, no matter what, I couldn't do it. Um, I will love my child, like, no matter what.
Mhm.
Um, I think I will never tell anybody else what their decision can be. But for me personally, I just know that I wasn't able to make that decision, nor would I have. Um, she already had a name. We were already bonded. Um,
Yeah.
and I was so protective of her. And I, like, already through everything. And I was so mad at the doctors for even their suggestion. And I think that they have to just do that just to give you all the options.
Right.
But it definitely felt like every single um, doctor's appointment they would say it,
Right.
which is hard to hear. So after that, um,
First of all, I want to stop you real quick. You just became like one of the strongest women I know. So I want to let you know that. You
Well,
are
thank
welcome for putting up with a bunch of doctors telling you to terminate a pregnancy and you just being like, well, here's my middle finger and you can sit
you.
on it.
Pretty much.
Because this is
Uh,
more important than, you know, which, obviously, I'm not saying this is the choice that every person should make, but given everything you're going through, to have the strength to still just keep pushing forward like you have been, and you still are, and honestly, from just how I've been following you as much as I have on like social media, I'm
mhm,
like, okay, you're
yeah.
coming out of the tunnel a little bit finally. And
Yeah.
it's really good to see that. But like finding out more about what was going on, you you definitely got some muscles growing. You
Thank you.
got some strength there, dude. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There, there's so many pieces to this story that sometimes I don't even like, I didn't realize it at the time, just everything that was going on.
You should write a book. No, I'm serious. This is actually a really amazing story, like of maternity and like motherhood and womanhood even in a lot of respects. I mean, not to be silly or like, but seriously, I think this would be something like, because is this the first time you've actually told the whole story like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is a lot. Like this is something that would be great for you to work through even, I think. That'd be awesome.
I mean, I would definitely be open to that. I think, these topics, I think they get pushed to the side a lot, especially in Christianity. In the church and, in these communities, you want to present yourself with like, and on social media, just in general, you just want to put the best out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes life is not the best.
Yeah.
Sometimes all you are dealt is just crap, like truthfully.
Just for a
And
year straight.
there, there's there's nothing good right now except for still breathing and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still breathing and I'm going. But it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And like life is messy.
Yeah. I
So
I
I
agree.
think I think we need to talk about this stuff. I think we need to talk about divorce. We need to talk about affairs and cheating. And I think we need to talk about, pregnancy is tough and special needs and a NICU experience. It's just a lot.
Yeah. So
Ugh.
so tell me about the NICU experience because she was a preemie, right?
She wasn't a preemie, but because of all of her diagnosis
Hmm.
um, and what potentially could happen when she was born, um, we knew for sure we were going to be staying in the NICU, at least for a short time.
Gotcha.
They're like, you could be here a few days, depending on how she is, or you could be there for several months. We just don't know. So I delivered in Indianapolis at St. Vincent. So it's 2 hours away from Washington. Um, so because of COVID and all the restrictions, there was only one person allowed to be in the hospital with you.
Yeah.
So before, there was like 4 people allowed.
Right.
So I was like, okay, it's not going to be like that awkward and everything because obviously Torrance and I, like I had already filed for divorce, but um, it couldn't go through and everything because, still pregnant and everything. But we're not together, but it was going to be fine because there were going to be other people in the hospital with us.
Right.
Then COVID happened, and so it's just Torrance and I in the hospital. So this is the first time in months that we have been in a room together for this period of time.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I'm like relying on him to be there and be supportive and just through a C-section, but then also we didn't know what all of her complications were going to be. So luckily, she was able to breathe on her own as soon as she came out. But because her ventricles had been so enlarged and she had so much fluid on her brain, um, they said basically like right away she was going to have surgery. She was going to have to get a shunt placed like immediately following birth. So the day of my C-section, um, they were like, yeah, we don't know if you're going to be able to see her and hold her before her surgery, because you have to be able to walk down to the NICU because of COVID, we can't wheel you into the NICU.
Yep.
I'm like, what? So I'm losing my mind and yelling at the doctors. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I don't care what you have to do. Nobody is telling me that I cannot hold my child. And it's not like, I was like, it is not fair that her dad gets to hold her before me and he hasn't even been here this whole time and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, crazy psycho lady. Um,
I
you
mean,
know,
you are when you're having a baby. That's valid. I think you are a crazy psycho lady when you're having a kid. That is 100% true.
so I'm sure they thought I was crazy, but it's okay. So, anyways,
You earned it at that point.
luckily, she did not have to have surgery immediately following birth, but um, she was scheduled for surgery the following day. So, by the time I was able to go down to the NICU to see her and hold her for the first time, it was like 8 hours after she was born. And she was already intubated.
Hmm.
So she had like, the tube down her mouth, and she was just kind of there, but she couldn't do anything. And it was, I mean, honestly, just terrifying um, to see her like that. Like, I remember um, I saw her and I was so happy to see her, but I just was crying so much because there was nothing I could do to help her.
Right.
And, um, you know, I couldn't even like pick her up out of bed to hold her.
Right.
Um, so it was just so, it wasn't like the same experience I had with Kai for sure. Um, and I just felt so helpless.
Yeah.
Um, and because of like COVID and everything, only one of us could be in the NICU at a time. So that was kind of helpful just because like I could have my time with her, Torrance could have his time with her. Um, and there was never a time that we had to
Be
be
together. Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So I felt like, okay, it kind of sucked, but also like maybe this is God's way of just still keeping us apart so it isn't as awkward.
Keeping you sane.
Yeah. So it was just like, oh my goodness, what is happening? Um, So the NICU experience was very difficult. We ended up being there for 31 days. Um, because of COVID, they didn't have like the St. Vincent house available and open. So they were like, you can stay in a hotel or you can go home and like come back to the hospital. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work for us. We live 2 hours away, and I'm not going to just leave my baby, at the NICU by herself.
Right.
So luckily, we were able to stay in a hotel, um, and just kind of like pay as we went. Um, and that was, still an awkward experience because we spent the whole month together. Again, still getting divorced, and we are sharing a hotel room and trying to like not fight and argue together and still trying to go one at a time to the NICU. So sharing that time was very difficult. Um, Obviously, she ended up having shunt surgery. She did really well with that. Um, and then we still didn't have like all of her diagnosis or anything while we were at the NICU. So right after she was born, they asked if genetic testing, like if we wanted that done to see like why she had the brain abnormalities and the symptoms that she had. Because as soon as she was born, they gave her a diagnosis of bilateral microphthalmia with her eyes because they were extremely small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I didn't like nobody knew that at the time. Like I did not expect her to not be able to see, I guess. So like the day after she was born, they're like, yeah, she's blind. And there's nothing we can do for that. Her eyes just didn't develop um, like they should. And so it's just like, oh my gosh, like where did that even come from? So we weren't going to do genetic testing, but the way they bill it, I was like, I'm not going to pay anything extra for it. And they're like, oh no, it's fine. It just goes under the NICU stay. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, we'll just see because it's not going to be anymore. Um, and then when they called us like 3 weeks later with the genetic testing, they're like, well, we think this is what it is, but you and Torrance need to come in and also get genetic testing done. So we have to do like a mouse swab. And we're like, okay, but what are you saying that she has? And so they ended up like telling us over the phone or telling me over the phone that they suspected she has Walker-Warburg syndrome. And I was like, well, I've never heard of that. I have no idea what that is. And, you know, the lady who is telling us the genetic testing, he basically was like, I don't want to tell you this over the phone, but it's not good. And so immediately it's like, oh my gosh, like what is not good? What does that mean? And you know, oh, I'm just okay. So she was like, okay, can you come into the office later this afternoon? And so I was like, yeah, I mean, we'll come into the office because we're still at the hotel. She's still in the NICU. So luckily we were able to go to the office together because majority of the appointments with the doctors, like we've just been able to go one, like only one of us could go.
Right.
So she brought us in there and she was like, okay, we think she has Walker-Warburg syndrome. And basically what that means is it's it's a congenital muscular dystrophy. And we're like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, we're still not like getting it. Still don't understand. And she's like, well, it's life limiting. And we're like, what does that mean? And she's like, well, we don't have a lot of information about it, but there's only been 13 case studies, and so it's very rare. And she's like, most children do not live past infancy, um, and it's very rare if kiddos live past 3. And we're just like, we don't even know what is happening. Like, it was just such a like blow, like a just punch to your gut kind of thing, because obviously we're healthy individuals. Our other child doesn't have any issues, and
Yeah.
then, this comes up. Um, and so they were like, we can't tell you like that 99, we're like, we can't tell you 100% this is what it is at this time because your genetic testing isn't back yet. But we think it's definitely it because this syndrome affects the brain, the eyes, and the like muscular system.
Yeah.
And we're just like, okay, like what do you say? Like we just don't know. Um, and then so after that, we went back into the NICU, and I was like, if our time is limited with Tala, I don't want to spend it in the NICU. I
Right.
don't want to stay here. It's not fair to her. It's not fair to us because, again, with COVID and everything, my parents hadn't met her.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter hadn't met her.
Yep.
Um, you know, so we were trying to like figure out how to get her home at this point.
Right.
Uh, and so, again, there's only one person allowed in the NICU at a time. So, all of these diagnoses and all of these encounters with the doctors and specialists, it's just me or Torrance, but majority of the time it was just me and all of these teams of doctors telling me this diagnosis. So as soon as you hear one thing, like, hey, your daughter's blind, but blah, 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 all I'm going to process is your daughter is blind. Or your daughter might not be able to do this. She might not be able to eat on her own. We are thinking she might need a G tube. She might need something else. You're going to have to learn how to put on oxygen. You're going to have to figure out how to change your G tube. You're going to have to figure out how to do all of these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And um, it was it was just such a time where it's like, God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea, like, how I'm going to get through this. And I just need you. um, and luckily, God is able to walk us through all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, because, I mean, without him and without, I feel like the angels that he has placed in our life, there's no way that we would have been able to get out of the hospital or make it home either. So she just came home from the NICU with oxygen, and she has to have a sleep apnea monitor because she has central nervous apnea. So sometimes, like, her brain, because it is structured differently, she doesn't always get like the right signals or messages to her lungs to continue to breathe.
Right.
So um, at night, obviously, she just has the monitor and oxygen just to ensure that if for some reason she did stop breathing or the monitor didn't pick up like her heartbeat or something, that it would alarm and kind of startle her awake, or startle me awake, and to try to like see that she's okay,
Yeah.
um, which is still terrifying. So, but after like 2 days, towards the end of her NICU stay, I was like, we're leaving. I don't care like what we have to do. Like, either you're going to discharge us or I'm taking all these monitors off and I'm taking her butt out of the NICU. Like, we're not staying here. This is not what I want for her. If we are not going to have all of her life, like, expectancy that I thought we were going to have together, like, I don't want to spend it here. I want to spend it with family. I want to spend it the way I want to spend it.
Right.
And so luckily, they have like a team. I think it's called like palliative care or something. Um, Anybody with basically a terminal diagnosis or complex diagnosis has a team of like social workers, doctors, and people that follow your child specifically throughout their entire life and helps you make decisions. But also is kind of like that segue between you and the doctors and letting the doctors know what values are most important to you. Um, and so luckily they were able to kind of back me up and like communicate to the doctors as well that we wanted to be home,
Right.
especially all of the um,
Craziness.
complexity of her, her life.
Yeah.
So basically, as soon as we had that discussion, like, it was probably 8 hours later and we were leaving. So
That's awesome.
since the NICU, just being home, um, honestly, she's been doing pretty great.
Yeah.
Like
From
we,
everything that I've seen you post, it seems like she's doing phenomenally well.
yes, she went home with an NG tube, so she had a feeding tube like through her nose, because she was eating very slowly, but she was eating. But it was just a way to ensure that she got all of the calories that she needed and everything. But once we were home and able to really just focus on her eating and not on the hospital timeline, um, I was able to take the NG tube out, I think 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember you posting about that, being able
yeah,
to take the tube out. So yeah, that's
yeah.
fantastic.
So that was wonderful. And she's still eating solely by a bottle. She's sideline fed, so it's a little different than like regular bottle feeding. But she just lays on her side and eats that way because
Hmm,
it's easier that way. She doesn't choke and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, she's been doing super well. She has physical therapy, she has occupational therapy. We're getting ready to start vision therapy. Don't ask me what that is because I have no idea.
right.
I think it's kind of basically to teach parents how to parent a blind child, basically, and
That
different things
sounds
because
useful.
she startles pretty easily,
Oh well, yeah.
um, because she isn't able to see certain things, or I don't know what she can or can't really see.
Right.
She might be able to see light, but we're not sure.
Yeah.
um, but like doors scare her if they shut doors or something, and so just like learning how to parent a little differently and teaching my toddler how to interact with her sister who has some special needs things.
Right.
It's very different. Um, but we always try to like talk to her before we touch her, like, hey, I'm gonna touch your face, or I'm gonna change your diaper, or I'm gonna put lotion on you, or mama's gonna kiss you now, those kind of things, just to kind of give her a heads up before she's just like, what is happening, why are you touching me? And so it's like
Right.
so much of the beginning stages of development. um, it's like it's a lot of visual cues,
Yeah.
like if does your child follow you and smile when you smile to them. I'm
Yeah.
like, man, we can't do that because she can't see us.
Yeah.
um, but just figuring out how to still meet those milestones, um, but taking that vision piece out, it's definitely been like a learning curve. So
That's
and
awesome though that you have people who can kind of come along and help with that, because that,
mm-hmm,
yeah, that would be hard. Um,
yeah,
trying to do that as yourself, as a parent, like, oh
yeah,
yeah, how do I figure out my kid who,
mm-hmm,
can't do certain things? Like,
yes,
yeah, huh? I had never thought of that before.
yeah. And
Huh?
it's like, not that I had anything figured out with Kai, but I was like, okay, I've had one child. I can probably do okay with the next one. And God was like, no, don't worry. Let me just throw this at you.
Swerve.
I'm like, okay, actually, I have no idea what's going on and what I'm doing, but it's definitely, I've been able to grow as a parent because I have to learn different things, and our normals are different, but they are normal to us now. Like putting oxygen on my child every night is normal now. Putting, leads on for her apnea monitor is normal now. And I've been trying really hard to teach Kai like empathy towards her sister, um, because I'm sure it's difficult because she does, like Tala requires a lot of time and attention, um, and trying to split that time is difficult, and I think she gets a little jealous. She is 3. Um, but even yesterday, she really wanted Tala's leads to be on her because Tala had it, And so I'm like, okay, like let's sit you down. Let's put these leads on you. We'll plug you in because you have to explain to a 3-year-old, monitors and stuff. And so we just say, oh, we got to charge your sister. Let's plug her in. And that's normal for her now.
Yeah.
So we plugged Kai in, and she felt so special because she was able to do what her sister gets to do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like,
Wow.
I said, oh, like Kai, you're learning empathy because you're putting yourself in your sister's shoes. And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm empathy now. I'm like, okay, well, kind of, but yeah,
Just have to
okay.
watch Inside Out. She'll get it.
Yeah.
It's
So
that's
it's like,
awesome. I was actually just about to say before. I mean, you very well put it. Anyway, it must be kind of cool to see how your parenting is shaped by having Tala now, and how that affects even how you're interacting with Kai.
yeah.
Like you even just how you were explaining communication, like, hey, before you touch her, before you do anything, when you're doing something, even that level of communication, I think that even shapes how like you'll interact with like your other kids or like anything else like that moving
Yeah.
forward. So that is actually I'm getting a bit to what parenting life is like now, and it's terrifying. Um,
Honestly, it is.
oh, it's a lot. It's awesome. It's really cool to see, and it's even cooler because like I'm somebody who likes looking at like people's development or like my own development and how like I've grown or changed or whatever.
Mhm.
And like hearing you talk about that and even being self-reflective on it and saying, yeah, I can tell I'm growing as a parent. You don't hear a lot of people say that phrase. Like a lot of people kind of do the first reaction, I have one, I'll be fine, with the next one. But like that's actually really reassuring for me as somebody who likes hearing that, that you're taking that, and obviously you're taking it very well in stride, and just kind of pushing forward. And the thing is, again, I've only gotten the Facebook view of everything, not the in-depth personal
Mhm.
view of it. But what I've seen on Facebook, you've been pushing forward as a parent, you've been pushing forward, um, as a single woman too. Now with because was the divorce finalized
Yep.
when that photo shoot happened? Because that was a pretty badass photo shoot, if I'm gonna be honest.
Yes. So we honestly, like, it's so bizarre. Like, just really, I don't know. But there was a lot that happened through our marriage and in our separation. Um, I don't know how we are able to communicate and be kind because there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we both are mature enough, and we both, I mean, I think it's helpful because I did work for DCS, and my degree is in social work and family science. So I'm like, I'd never want like my relationship and failed relationships to affect my children in such a negative manner.
Yeah.
So like we never fight in front of the kids. Like we pretty much split, like we're pretty easygoing with the kiddos and where that's concerned.
Yeah.
And we pretty much only talk about them because it's easiest that way. Um, but as far as like the divorce and everything, it was over pretty quickly once it was like filed and able to happen. Um, like we
I mean,
basically signed it, and we didn't have to go to court or anything, thank goodness.
but you guys
Uh,
have been separated already for how many months at that point?
so I never moved back in with him. So
Right.
even while going through everything, so really we've been separated since August of 2019,
Right. And then the divorce happened.
like May 20th.
Yeah. So you'd almost had a year of being apart already. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. I know sometimes divorces, like you said, it was able to be quick and easy, and it's not always. And that's
Yeah.
oddly a blessing for anybody who, is okay with divorce. That's
Yeah. And I think it was like, it was so tough. I mean, it even though we had been separated for that long, I don't feel like I was able to grieve the relationship, and grieve the marriage and what I thought, and who I thought we were as a couple, um, because I was so caught up in everything, with Tala. You
right.
know, there was a lot of grief that happened over the past year. I was grieving my marriage. I was grieving the person who I had fallen in love with, and I was grieving, all of the things that happened. Um, I was grieving my child, um, in that I didn't know how she was going to develop. I was grieving that she's never going to be able to see my face.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was grieving that I'm not going to see her grow up,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so I feel like grief,
Expectations of what life was, of what
yeah,
life you wanted life to be,
yes,
kind of recognizing, oh, that's not it. This
yeah,
is
like,
just not
yeah, the picture that, you had kind of expected or thought could be,
right. Hope.
um, and what you wanted, it wasn't the path that it is now. And so again, like just grieving that and being okay with grieving that and going in and out of those grief stages, I had to be okay with. And that's not something that, is easy because,
Yeah.
kind of sometimes when you talk about it, people are like, man, that happened a long time ago. Why are you grieving that? Why are you grieving this marriage? He's, X, Y, and Z. But you can't stay mad forever. You can't stay in that spot where you're never going to get past it. You're never going to grow and you're never going to heal. And right now I think I'm just trying to learn how to heal. Like I wish I could say, "Oh, I'm healed. I'm good. I'm doing great now." Um I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to heal. And for me, part of that was the pictures.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, one of our kind of big arguments was, um, he would never take pictures with me or as a family. There were things that were important to me versus not to him, and that was important to me, and it just it never happened. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be part of my healing. I'm going to do the things that I want to do. Um, and it was just kind of a way to again get that confidence back after someone has kind of cheated and had affairs and you feel bad about yourself and then you're
Yeah.
gaining weight because you're pregnant and you're like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? and
Well,
then
trying to
and then
gain weight the
say,
first part of the pregnancy anyway. Trying to.
so it was kind of healing, kind of trying to find myself again, get that confidence back.
Yeah.
um, but it was good.
Yeah.
So
So, and kind of on your point of, you'll talk to somebody about it years down the line, and they'll be like, well, why is that still heavy for you? And an analogy popped into my head. Grief is like a field that you have to tend on your own. You have to plow it yourself, you have to plant the
mhm.
seeds yourself, and then you have to wait and wait and wait and wait. And then maybe if the rain comes and everything else happens just right, then you get some fruit from it.
Yes.
So I get that. I get where you're coming from there. Um, Kind of to shift tone a little bit, because I know I mentioned this earlier, and I'm kind of curious as to, you know, how, with the grieving process, with um, everything that's going on with COVID, with life, you know,
Hmm.
how it is. You know, you said you want to keep kind of any relationship failures, anything like that away from, you know, your kids. You don't want that to affect them, which I, first of all, I applaud. That's a good mom move in my book. Um, but well, good parent move, I should say. In my, but I know single motherhood is hard. Um, with that, what does dating look like for you moving forward, or what has it looked like, if there has been any sort of stepping into the water to see if it's too hot or too cold? Because that it's, I mean, like I was telling you earlier, dating in general, it seems like is so complicated and so
Mm-hmm.
frustrating as is, you know. And I know both of us have kind of been lamenting like, oh, life is, you know, just adulting is hard.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what to do next is hard. Trying to figure out what you're doing in 10 minutes, that's hard.
Mhm. Yes.
What's
Yeah.
dinner? I don't know. That's 10 minutes from now problem. I don't, you know.
Mhm. Um, I don't even know. So I would like to say that again that I have it figured out, but I don't. I don't want my hurt to hurt someone else.
Oof. Okay.
Um, I, but again, I don't know. I, I think it's hard to know what you still need to heal from if you don't ever date anybody, or not talk to anybody. But it's scary
Oh,
to step out in that.
that's a good. Oh, I like that. That Sorry, I know I'm being weird, but that was just like a weird revelation in my head, because like a philosophy I always have is like we're kind of always constantly healing or constantly growing in some way. So like
Mhm.
for me, especially when I was like in college, and you know, I talk to different people about dating, or I try to flirt with people and try to
Mhm.
be dating. Um, one of the things I would hear a lot is, you know, like, oh, I'm working on myself, I'm working on the, and that's still, you know, that's happens at any age at this point, unless you're in
Yeah.
your 30s and you're like, fuck it, just come on, let's just, you know, once you hit that point, you're just like, come on, let's whatever
Yeah.
this is gonna be, let's just
Uh-huh.
do it. Uh,
Yep.
but it seems like that's kind of a hang up for some people, to want to take time to not date or not participating in the dating field. And I think sometimes that's good. I think other times, exactly what you said, well, the two things that you said. The first one is, when you date, you become more self-aware,
Mhm.
become more aware of what it is specifically that you're trying to heal from. You become aware of like the areas that you need to grow in, from
Yeah.
success or failure in dating, I would argue.
Yeah.
um, on the other hand, like you said, you don't want to hurt people with your baggage. And I know for me, I've been
Mhm.
in situations where I've dated people, or I've talked to people, tried to start relationships with people who they weren't, they didn't come from a lot of healthy relationships. Like a lot of their past relationships had been very toxic or abusive.
Mhm.
Um, and then like coming to me, I then see some of those traits of the people that they were with, that they described to me, come out
Mhm.
towards me or towards other people. And I'm like, oh, you've learned this behavior because that's what you're used to.
Mhm.
Like you learn some of the negative habits of your partners. And so
Yep.
you got to then learn how to, you know, not just interact with a person the same way that you've interacted with this other person who's been important to you for however long, or however many people have treated you a certain way for however long.
Right.
Because it tends to become like a trail of tears, quite
Yep.
um
Yeah.
probably the worst possible phrase I could have used. Yeah, compare dating to the trail of tears. That's a good
I mean, I
uh,
feel pretty on. So.
hmm, it's tough.
It is. I think it's like, and right now, I'm like, I don't want to, it's not just me dating. Okay.
Right.
So it's me and my toddler and my special needs infant.
And your parents technically because you're living with them,
Yes.
which is a whole other bundle of fun.
Yes. I'm like, how am I supposed to like even date somebody? Like this is going to be my resume. I'm 26. Uh, I'm divorced. I have a toddler. I have a 4-month old, not currently working. Um, my daughter has special needs and she's has a terminal diagnosis. I have zero trust for anybody. So yeah, please date me. Like it's just you want to
Hey,
be honest,
you,
but
that's better. That But see, you can spin that, and this is gonna sound terrible. You can spin that and just say, "Hey, I'm a 26-year-old divorced MILF. What's up?" Like at least you can spin it on a dating profile that makes it a little bit better, right? You can make it not as horrible.
you just have to laugh. Like clearly I need someone with humor because my life is a joke right now. But it's fine.
There you go. Just become a stand-up comedian, mom. There you go. That's how it works.
I wish I was funny because I could have some good content. Oh man.
I mean, you obviously have a sense of humor with it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to deal with it the way you are.
Yeah. I think thank goodness I was in social work and we have terrible like you know, dark humor.
Absolutely dark humor.
But
Oh my gosh. No,
I
I
it is tough though. I've been on two like official dates with the same person. And I think it is hard because I want to be completely honest and upfront. Like, I'm not dating just to date and have fun and mess around. I want to be married. I want to be in a committed relationship. I will not handle infidelity. I will not handle lying. It's me and my children. And this is everything we've been through. And if you can't handle it, then clearly you're not the right one for me
right.
because I'm not going to waste my time. Um, because again, my time is limited. And if I am going to remarry, I would want Tala to be a part of that, because she is a part of my life. She is a part of this story. And I don't ever want to rush into anything, but I think that if I would find that right person, things would probably happen quickly because, again, I'm not holding things back. I'm not like, oh, let's just see where things go. I'm on the first date. Okay, this is what this is, and we're
Oh,
gonna talk about all of that. And I think I would like that up front. Like let's not just like beat around the bush here. Like this is what I want out of life. This is what I'm looking for, and if if it doesn't go anywhere, that's perfectly fine with you. But I don't want to waste my time with that.
right.
Um,
You
so
don't
it's like
have the emotional energy for it.
I don't. I like again. I'm only 26, but I'm exhausted. like
Yeah.
I'm
I mean, you
I'm
had a whole year of mess. What do you expect?
I'm emotionally tired, and that carries over physically. I'm like it's 8 o'clock. I'm ready for bed.
We have dinner reservation at 5 because I'm an
Yeah,
old woman and I turn into a pumpkin at 9, not midnight. That's
literally. Like my parents, I have a curfew. Like it's tough. I don't know. Just trying to like figure out where I go and where like what I still need to work on.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, trust is an issue because unfortunately, like every rumor that I ever heard turned out to be true. Um, every time someone's phone goes off, like if I'm with them, I think, oh, I wonder who they're texting. I wonder what, they're sending, or, um, and I don't want to be that way. And
Yeah.
I'm still trying to heal from that. And I don't know exactly how I can other than time. Um, and learning and knowing that not everybody, is trying to hurt me.
Yeah.
But it's hard whenever I've come from such a relationship that it felt like that's all it was. Um,
Yeah, it's
and
hard not to take something that was traumatizing
mhm,
and I mean in a sense, like I don't want to, obviously I can't say that you have something or not, but it's almost like a PTSD thing when you've been cheated on in like a very committed relationship. You anything that looks like it reminds you of it.
absolutely.
I actually had a situation, this is a couple years back when I was dating my ex. Um, maybe no, it was last year, wasn't it? No, no, no. Was it? No, it was a couple years back. It was 2018. Um, and I remember I went to my mom's for Thanksgiving with my girlfriend at the time, and she was on her phone playing games and like doing stuff, and just because she felt weird around my mom, and I feel weird about around my mom sometimes enough, so like I get it. And then she was just kind of there with me, my mom, and my mom's boyfriend, so she was just trying to make herself comfortable, and I got that, and I knew like there was a little bit of anxiety there, so I was like, okay, it's whatever. And my mom, at one point, we're like sitting there doing dishes or something, and she's like, "Hey, she's on her phone a lot. You know who she's talking to?" And I was like, "Where, where did that come from?"
Mhm,
And my mom was like, "Well, in one of my relationships that happened, I found out that somebody was messaging somebody else and talking to somebody else in a way that I thought was just for me while we were together." And I was like, "You are projecting.
yeah,
Like you're putting that on me now." And I, and
yeah,
I, and I had never thought about it in a way that like that's how cheating affects people, but it does.
mhm,
Like if you see it, there's just like
absolutely.
there's red flags that don't need to be red flags just because of that experience.
Mhm,
It's I don't want to call it paranoia because I don't think that's fair because it there was like a legitimate base to what happened, but
absolutely.
it's
It
just always there.
Absolutely. I think for me, like, it's not only that, like, I don't trust others. I don't think everybody's bad. I don't think that everybody's going to make the same choices that my ex made. I don't think that. I don't think everybody's out to get me, but I don't trust what people say. I have to trust their actions now. But I also feel like I I have to learn how to trust myself again, because I did trust my husband and things that he said, but then, was always, it found out to not be true, or this was happening, or I found out this again, or whatever it was. Like I have to like trust myself, like, okay, is this a red flag or is this my trauma?
Is
And
this
it's
a red
hard to
flag or a red
decipher that.
flag?
Yes. And so I'm like, again, I'm guarded for others. I don't want to hurt others. And then I'm guarded because I don't want to be hurt by others. So it's like, oh my goodness,
No,
mess.
I I don't know. I'm kind of uniquely lucky in that situation because I've not had to experience that yet that I'm aware of. To be fair, maybe people were just more of a smooth criminal than I expected. Um, but for me, like being cheated on was never my biggest worry. Um, so it's different, and that,
Hmm.
like you said, that's what makes it complicated. I
Yeah.
think the other side of it is like what you said. You're also conscientious enough to uh, try to take care of other people and not just put all your junk on them, which I think is great. Um, one more shift because I know we've been going for a while. Um, which is, I mean, it's all been good. We talked about some stuff I did not expect to talk about.
Yeah, I apologize.
No,
There's a lot going on that I'm just telling you. So.
it's all good stuff. And it's, I mean, it's weirdly refreshing not to just talk about COVID or like Black Lives Matter or everything else going on, but like
Yeah,
actually talk about somebody's shit. Like it's a
I
bit,
will talk about it all day if you need. I got some good stories.
but I want to shift another time because there's two things I have to ask you. I'm going to ask you the very surface level one first, and the deeper one second, because they're the two things I love talking about most. Uh, First one is I have to ask all of my guests. I made that commitment at the very beginning of this podcast that I would ask, what is your favorite color and why?
Okay. I have two favorite colors.
Oh, okay.
I know. So it's green and purple.
Hmm.
Green, I think it's just refreshing. I love like plants and flowers. Like I don't know why, but I just love it so much. And then purple, it just reminds me of my grandma. It was her favorite color, and I've just always loved it. So I think I just associate that color with her. So those are my two favorites.
Okay. See, I'm glad that you actually have a reason. Some people don't have a reason. Mine, I've said this before, I don't always say it, but my favorite color has always been red since I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid. Because when I was like in preschool, my brain started associating red with like a Valentine's Day heart. So I was like, oh, red means love.
Oh,
And
of
so that's why red is my favorite. And then, of course, I liked Power Rangers growing up. So Red Ranger, you had strength
course.
and courage. And then as I get older, I'm like, okay, so we got love, we got strength, we got courage, and let's throw in passion. So, like, those are the four things that red, pulls to my brain.
Love
Uh,
that.
so that's why it's my favorite color. Um, you know,
I
but,
love it.
and the other thing that I talk about a lot and I try to hit on is religion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of how I phrase it. Where are you at with this whole God thing? Obviously, you've mentioned it several times through what we've talked about already, as far as a support, especially through all the stuff you've been going through, um, recognizing kind of like the blessings that you have, a way to kind of reflect on that. Um, it seems like you have a generally positive view of God. You're definitely still a Christian, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of tell me a little bit more if you have anything else to share about it, because I know for me, my whole experience has been very different over the past couple of years. So I'm curious. I'm kind of figuring out what other people's ideas are.
Okay. Um, so I grew up as a Christian my whole life,
Hmm.
um, but I never committed my life to Christ. Um, so I think it was the Sunday after I found out about the affairs, and I had left and everything. I was just so angry and mad, and um, I was so full of emotions. And I was like, I'd been going to the church that I'm currently at for about a year, and I was just so like, just full of anger and hurt and pain, and I did not want to be full of that. And I was like, I know that I need God. I know that I want I want this destination, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get there, but I know that I'm feeling called to give my life to Christ. And so I was baptized last year, August 11th. And so
Wow.
after that, um, I was like, okay, like, you think once you have God in you, things might get better. And I think as people, we think that, but that's not the reality that we live in.
Right.
Um, because it is what it is.
Is what it
Um, but because my life has like completely changed since then. Um, there's been a lot of hurt, a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, so many things that I did not think I would ever get through. Um, I've had to be, picked up off the floor because I just couldn't get up because like heartache and sickness and hearing your child um, is not going to live a long life. Um, and I don't think I would have ever been able to get through that and experience that um, without God. Because when I pray, I don't ask him, why is this happening? I ask like, what are you trying to help me through? What are you trying to get me to recognize? Like, who are you placing in my life and who are you taking out of my life so that I can be on this path to get to that destination that I do want wholeheartedly? And I know, like, he places people and things in my life at the right time, even when I don't know I need it. Like I think it was in January of this year, my church has the dollar difference, and they like pick a family who needs assistance or help, and they can like it could be financial, but they could like give them a car or like help build something on their house if they need it or whatever. But I was gifted a check, and it was so helpful because I was able to stay in the NICU the entire month because I had that check from them. Um, so like God put that in my life for me to use, and I didn't even know that I was going to need it. I joined Celebrate Recovery, and I thought I was, recovering from my marriage, but I'm recovering from my marriage, but I'm also recovering from this whole diagnosis with Tala and figuring out my life that it is now.
Yeah.
Um, so back in August when I joined that, I didn't recognize and know like that I would need it for the future too,
Yeah.
in that manner. But God did, and He put these people with their experiences and led them to that group as well. And I can't tell you how many times like these people and their experiences have helped me like overcome and get through the things that I'm going through as well. And I know it's God because he's doing this. Like we think we have control, but we don't. We do not have control. And so it's just I just know deep down like he is the one that not put the bad things in life, but is going to use these experiences to get to where I need to be.
Right.
That way, first of all, I can have that relationship with Him and have that relationship with Him in heaven, but also that I will be able to spend my eternity with my babies too. Because my time here might be short with my child, but I know that I will have eternity with her, and she will be able to see me, and she will be able to walk and, all the things that she might not be able to do here. I was speaking with like kind of like the minister on staff in the NICU, and she's like, a lot of people lose their faith in Christ because of these experiences.
Yeah.
Please don't. Like, no matter what happens, um, your hope, you can't lose it. Your hope is going to change and it's going to shift. And so you might not, you're hopeful for X, Y, and Z and that your child can do these things,
Mhm.
but it might not be that like that hope it can be in that anymore. You have to figure out what your hope can be in. And
Yeah.
so that's why my hope is no longer in can my child do this? It's what experience can we have together?
Mm.
And so I think just like even simple conversations, God facilitates that too. Like I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that hope. It can't be placed in what we can or can't do, but what experiences can we get from that?
So I think you have a very wise approach to God in prayer. And I also think it's interesting because I don't think I knew that you hadn't been baptized when we were in college.
Yeah.
So that's funny. Although
Yep.
I get why you might not want to make that very public at the school that we went to. Um, you know, um, I think I think your approach to trying to understand what's going on. I think your desire to find meaning in that rather than trying to figure out why it's happening, but trying to figure out that process to move forward. That's a very wise approach to God that I don't see very consistently. Um, I think that's actually wonderful. I think that's a very good focus for a prayer life. I I don't know. I'm not sure where I stand on the idea of God being as active as you kind of described, because for me it's more I see God kind of everywhere, and so it's like a constant presence, but I don't see like a because I find it hard to determine, okay, if this is from God, then is this also from God? So
Mhm.
if a guy doesn't tip me anything on a delivery, is that from God to test my patience? And if I get a $20 tip, is that a I'm minimizing, but just kind of the idea of if I get the good, do I also, you know, blame God for the good and the bad is what I tell people, don't
Mhm.
blame God for all the good in your life because that's,
Right.
it takes credit away from the good nature and the genuine loving kindness of the God in other people around you. As
Yeah.
well as, don't blame God for all the bad for, you know, other people's selfishness and other people's own ability to not recognize the God in you.
Right.
That makes sense. So for me, it's kind of a dance, and I'm not sure which foot I'm
Mhm.
leading with at this point. Uh,
Yeah.
as far as like just with that part, uh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but I've been I tell people all the time, and it's like, oh, I've been looking into some Buddhist teachings, or like, oh, I've been looking
Mhm.
at this guru, or whatever,
Mhm.
which I think those can be really helpful and very insightful, and can kind of give us a little bit of a perspective shift, um, even still while claiming Christ. I know
Right.
for me, I kind of told myself I stopped being a Christian. Oh shoot. Um, about a year ago, maybe a little bit less. But recently it's been kind of funny. Different people I've been talking to and different people I've been listening to, like Rob Bell, um, have been kind of pulling me back to this idea of a still um, Christian leaning, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, like, I've always, even when I told myself I wasn't a Christian, I was like, I still love the idea of Jesus. I
Mhm.
still see a God in the Bible in the sense of like how I read it, how I interpret everything. I'm like, I still see God.
Yeah.
Still very much see use in this train of thought. But I was so frustrated with the church, and I was so frustrated with um, different ideas on God. Like for instance, this one, how active is God? To what extent?
Mhm.
Is there like a puppeteering? Well, that's not fair. Um, to what extent is God's thumb pressing
Right.
something specific in my life? Maybe that's a better
Right.
analogy to use.
And
Um,
I mean, I can understand that perspective too,
yeah.
because I feel like I question that on some level. I think anybody does. Um,
Well, it sounds like you've been questioning it for a while, and then you just finally kind of gave in.
yeah, and I think I'm like I don't I don't see him doing that, only because we do have free will, and we have choice,
Hmm.
and we have that option to follow him or not.
Right.
And I feel like, for me, I felt very differently when I accepted Jesus into my heart versus before.
Yeah.
Things, and maybe it's just my perspective changed and I am seeking him
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I do feel like, there is that difference inside of me, inside of my heart, inside of my mind. There is that renewing of the mind. There is that change internally in my heart. Um, and maybe that's what caused me to think differently, and act differently and want things in a different way. I don't know. Um, but I might not ever know, you know?
I
So,
I think you're on the right track there because and again, kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference, but once you take some of the Kool-Aid, um, it does. It completely changes you. It's when you kind of jump head first into this whole Jesus thing, it it is a paradigm shift when
mm,
you genuinely jump into it. So I think you're right. I think your mindset changes, your perspective on a lot of different things in life starts shifting, especially when you're in a church community that sounds like it's pretty encouraging, as well as
mhm,
it sounds like they're continuing to help shape that idea in a healthy way. So I do. I think you're right. I think that's a piece of it is when you have a new openness to the idea of who Jesus and God are,
mhm,
as well as a community that can kind of continue building that house with you. It
right.
it definitely makes you feel differently and act differently
Yeah,
and think differently. Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely.
but
And I think that's what is so nice. You hear scripture, and one day it affects you one way, and another day it affects you another way. And is it because God changed? No, it's because you changed, and your experiences and what you're going through right then is different.
yeah,
Um, I think that is why, it is the living, you know, Christ in you, and it it's it's comforting. It's also like, I don't know, but I don't know.
no, I think God.
But sometimes, and I think we all want it to just be, this is the way it is, and that's exact, and that's how it's gonna be, and it's not ever gonna change. And
That's so boring to me though, because then you don't
that's
you
all
don't get
I
to
can.
you're right, you don't get to think about, well, what if? What if
Yeah,
God is like this? What if God is in that tree?
yeah,
What if there's something to Buddhism and like how the idea that, you know, we all are simply a reflection of God and this creation and everything else is really
hmm,
all just one big thing and we're just
hmm,
telling ourselves a joke to, pretend
hmm.
like we're not and have individual, like you can take it as far as you want.
Yeah, and I think there is some truth and validity in that too.
Right. And that's the thing. Like for me, I think the reason, the more I think about it, the more I didn't want to be a Christian, the more I wanted to look into other sources of truth. Because there's really a lot of consistency if you let
Hmm,
me. And it kind of also even comes down to God is what you are allowing God to be in your life. Whatever you feel like you can let God become is what God will become.
hmm.
And kind of like what you were saying, if you're just told God is this way and that's all God ever is, well, then that's all God will ever be.
Right.
Life will ever be.
Hmm.
When you let yourself open up and you kind of start asking those questions, you start uh, understanding and like empathizing with other ideas, you start being like, oh, so
Hmm.
that could be true. so what does that mean for my life? And then it kind of becomes this kind of fun dialogue, tennis
Yeah.
match even at times of, hey, what is this whole thing that I'm doing called life? And it gives
Mhm.
insight, but it also doesn't, which is kind of where I'm at, going all the way back to the beginning of how adulting is hard, because
Yep.
I don't know what to do next, because the reality is there's so many options,
Yeah.
and which is ironic because I do and don't have options because of finances. Um,
Hmm.
again, you understand.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of a point, ironically, at the same time, of privilege, of saying, there's this potential of really anything happening. Um,
Hmm.
and it really kind of comes down to what is your willingness to go a certain direction or have a certain goal and kind of keep moving towards it. And that
Yeah.
all, still is in that same big bubble of, well, what is God and what is this life? And it's interesting to me when I sit and think about it some days.
Hmm. It's like you want to try to make sense of it all, but
Yeah.
can our minds even like fathom?
Bites.
Like I don't think that's why I'm just like I'm just relinquishing that control because clearly I
Yeah.
can't understand and can't handle it.
Yeah.
So
You have this meatloaf that's kind of been put in front of you, and you're like, I need to get through this before I can have anything else at the table. Yeah, I'm gonna let
yeah,
that be and just enjoy the
yeah,
meatloaf.
yep, yeah. So,
Oh my gosh. Well, do you have anything you want to say? Any ideas, any thoughts?
oh man, I wanted to thank you for letting me share a lot of my story. I really appreciate it. Um, if I can ever help and any time I will.
My cat just
Children.
decided to come say hi on a Zoom call.
Oh,
He's been sitting here at the edge of my bed this entire time just
oh my
waiting. So he's
goodness.
like, "Come on,
Oh, so sweet.
man." You thing. Anyway,
I
yes,
just I just appreciate your openness to talking about things that are hard in life and you know being honest about them because I think a lot of times people feel shame or
yeah,
they feel like they can't talk about things. Um, and that's perceived as, oh, that doesn't happen here in this community or whatever. And that's not the reality because when I started sharing, my experiences, there are so many people and women who have reached out and it's like, you know what, I've gone through that too, or I'm going through that right now, and I don't know who to talk to, and I don't know them except for on Facebook or in passing, um, but just getting that like dialogue going is so important. So I'm so glad that you have this podcast to share in that.
well, and I thank you for saying that, and you're very welcome that, I've given you somewhere to just kind of get it out. Like I said, I genuinely think you should write a book. I think writing, I mean, I've always thought that writing can be really helpful for us personally, but I think
Hmm.
you being able to write this story and like everything that you've actually went through, because there's a lot there, you have hurt, you have a conversion story, you have, processing through a pregnancy, getting through hyperemesis, which is a whole other mess. You have a lot going on there that I think could be really cool. Exactly what you said, a really good insight for people that sometimes think that there has to be shame behind just dealing with shit.
Hmm.
Like, as weird as that sounds, but you're right. I think it is weird that we sometimes feel shame about just having to deal with what life gives us.
Yes.
And you said, sometimes people feel shame for what they go through, and I said, the thought that popped in my head is, speaking of my problems with the church, but at the
Yeah.
same time, one of my biggest struggles is recognizing um, exactly what you found, that when you open up about your hurt, oftentimes there will be people who are empathetic and who'll come alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I mean, you're one of those people, you're a social worker to begin with.
Yeah.
So like you know that firsthand because that's how you are. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes being that person, you don't expect other people to do it for you because
Right.
you're often one of the few that do it for those pe- it's a weird mental block because I get that because
Mm-hmm.
I'm similar.
Yes.
I do 100%. Um, but it's great that you've had women come up and be a support system for you outside of your family. And
Mm-hmm.
what I was saying is one of my struggles is recognizing that that can still happen in the church, but it's on a very much individual level. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the hard part that some churches struggle with and others are very successful with at the same time. And that's my own mental game I have to play later. But
Yeah.
um, and I do. I thank you for being open to share it. I wasn't sure how this was going to go because, you know, this was a fresh story still for you in a lot of ways. And, um, I'm excited that we covered a lot and was able to hopefully give you a book idea. I'm pushing that. I'm
Yeah.
seriously going to push that as hard as I can because I think that would be a great idea. Um,
I need the people now. Gotta send them my way.
exactly.
Start my career. Start my modeling career.
I mean, I don't know. That photo shoot was pretty fire. Just gonna say
Aspiring to do new things. It's fine.
that is what life is about, trying new things.
Yes.
Well, Teeny, thank you so much for joining me. And for anybody else who's listening, thanks for joining us, and I'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye.